So hello my dear friends, I've come here from a land of diversity called India, and to be more specific, I come from a southern state called Karnataka, and this is my hometown. We're all gathered here as environmentalists, but I'm going to talk to you as a traveler today, because what traveling has taught me, what it has introduced me to new cultures and new landscapes, and it has helped me expand my horizons beyond my academic degrees. I could have picked any story from any part of India, but I'm going to tell you a story that I embarked on quite recently in life and happens to be very close home and very close to my heart. About 3 years back, when I quit my job at a research institution which works in the field of ecology and conservation, I had these grand plans of working with policymakers. I thought, that's the only place to make changes, and I'm going to find a job where I can work with people who are up there making decisions. I did find a couple of such jobs, but then I found myself to be a misfit, and I had to quit. And then again, I was without a job on my hand, but at the same time, I was introduced to this fascinating world right in my backyard by a very close friend, Manohar. He was, I can't just call him a friend. He's more like a friend, a philosopher, and a guide. He and his team had put together a report which talked about a breed of cattle, a pastoral system. It talked about traditional management practices, and most importantly, it talked about biodiversity conservation, which was linked to all these things. He sent me this report, and he wanted me to read it and edit it, and also give him an ecologist's perspective. I just devoured the report because it contained everything. It was like a fairy tale to me. It contained every element that I had never heard of, and all this right in my backyard. I was so fascinated and so intrigued by this entire story that I started a new journey and started exploring these landscapes. During my visits, what struck me really was the dryness and the aridity of the place. For someone who had worked most part of her career in rainforests with lush green forests, these treeless landscapes which were dry and brown seemed like an entire new world. And then, of course, the traveler in me was so excited that I had to know more. Then I started exploring more, and remember I was telling you about the cattle. This is the breed of cattle. You might be wondering, well, you come from India and cows are holy. What's so special? What is special about this breed is that it has a very long history to it. This breed of cattle has several strains. I've brought you 2 pictures of it. It has 3 distinct strains. And much of what is documented we get from the government records. According to their records, the history dates back to about 16th century, where the kings that ruled this land at that time, they recognized the beauty of this breed, they recognized the power of this breed, and started an entire institution around it. They almost had like a department which took care of the upkeep of this particular breed. But it was not until the late 18th century that a Muslim ruler by name Tipu Sultan, who came into power, and then he completely revamped the entire system. He is credited to have named this breed Amrit Mahal. Amrit means nectar, and Mahal is the department. So he called it the Department of Nectar, because it is said that though the cows are rarely milked, it is said that the taste of the milk is so sweet that it is as good as nectar. So if it's a poor milk yielder, why were they so interested? Why were the rulers, why did they invest so much of money? Why did they invest so much of their resources into this breed? It is because this particular breed is extremely fierce, extremely strong, and highly drought resistant. In a place which receives hardly any rainfall, these are the characteristics that you want. And what did they use it for? In military. They were used as front line of defense. They were used to carry very heavy military equipment, and they were also used for the defense of the army. So because of these characteristics, the kings found it worthwhile to invest in them. And what is the story today? Of course, we don't use cattle in military anymore, but they still exist. The cattle exist, the grazing lands exist, and you might ask why. And much of the traditional practices also exist. This is how they are grazed. Even today, all the cows belong to the state. They are reared in grazing pastures that have been historically reserved specifically for grazing them. They have a transhuman system of grazing, which means that specific grazing pastures have been earmarked for specific seasons. And these grazing lands can look from anything like a grassland to something with some sparse vegetation to something like a scrub jungle. So again, why are they used today? There is still a huge demand that exists in the villages of my state for these particular cattle. Every year, about a year-old bulls are weaned away from their mothers and auctioned off only in 2 auctions. And there is so much of interest in this auction that people come from all over the state. They gather, thousands of people gather. You see a picture of all the men being so excited about this auction. Even if they don't come to buy it, they want to come and see it. They're so enthusiastic about just watching the bulls, and they want to see how good they are, how better are they from the previous years, and all those kinds of things. Like one of them told me, one of the farmers who had come to buy the bulls told me, it is like having a Benz car. I feel as good. I feel as if I have a Benz car that, when I have a pair of Amrit Mahal bulls. So this entire system that I have been talking to about, the grandeur and the legacy, also has a very has an institution of knowledge that we don't recognize that is associated with this. This man here comes every year to the auction as an advisor to the bidders. He comes, his word is taken so seriously that people are willing to pay any amount of money if he approves of the bulls. And he has this ability to look at a pair of calves and say whether those bulls will grow up to be really good ones or not. Then moving away from the auction, back to the grazing lands, there are institutions of knowledge again existing in various other forms. Like this little boy here I had met during one of my field visits. He is a pastoralist and very shy little boy who had never gone to school, dark skinned because he was out in the sun all day, just with his animals. And what struck me most about him was that he knew the landscape like the back of his hand. He knew the geography of the place, he knew the plants that exist there, he knew the names of them, he knew what uses, how he can use them, not just for himself, but for his sheep. I mean, put yourself in his place. What if you were a little boy with just your animals and no human being for tens of kilometers, and either you or one of the animals is hurt? What would you do? You can't run to a doctor, you have to know the place. You can't lose your sheep because that's your currency, right? There are also systems of knowledge associated with animal husbandry. Drylands across the world, they have been centers of breeding livestock. They have livestock of all kinds, ranging from sheep to goats to cattle to even dogs that have originated in drylands. Another important thing about this particular landscape is the weaving of this beautiful blanket called kambli. This blanket not only keeps them warm, but it is also waterproof, and most importantly, it is woven by just a single community which specializes in the weaving of these blankets. They don't, and it is believed that nobody else, no other community people can weave it, and if they do, the blanket just breaks apart. It's also considered very sacred. So, for example, if somebody sits on a kambli, they are not supposed to speak lies. They're just supposed to speak the truth. That is why a kambli is used during weddings and also during important decision making in the villages. There's a very elaborate process that's involved, which is highly localized. The technology is local, the labor is local, and the raw material is local. So first the sheep is sheared, again by a community that specializes in shearing the sheep. It's not like I have sheep and I can just shave it off or something. Then the wool is separated by a method called carding. Then the wool is spun into threads, usually by women. This is a very common scene that you will see in the villages in this landscape. Then they make a paste of tamarind seeds and some other herbs. They make something like a starch and then put it on the threads. They just spread it on the threads to make it easy for weaving, and then the blanket is woven. Then there are other crafts that are associated, such as weaving of palm baskets, again specialized by a completely different community. And then they make these really ornate arts. I mean, this is like this is a piece of art. I would think, why would anybody make their acts so ornate? And then there is the story of nomadic pastoralists, because if I start getting into the details of which, I will need quite some time. So I will just tell you that nomadic pastoralists again travel from the north of the state to up to the coastal region, and they are extremely knowledgeable, not just about the landscape and about the people and everything. They have a very unique way of, they have a very unique understanding of this entire landscape at a very broad scale. And then these grazing lands are also centers of religion and spirituality. There are shrines that are spread across these grazing pastures. This one here is my favorite shrine. It just has a single tree and a few stones around it, and they have songs. Lot of communities have songs which are associated with these grazing lands. So now, of course, as always, there has to be, things can't be so beautiful, and there has to be a threat. And there are various threats to these grazing lands. They are all decreasing. And before even I get to what is causing this decrease, one thing in my observation that I have seen, after having spoken to thousands of people who are associated with this, having toured different kavals, it seems to me that one thing that is common is, what I would like to term as politics of inadequacy. What does that mean? Despite having so much of knowledge and culture and tradition, it is as if it is not enough. And what does that look like on ground? It looks like a grazing land that is filled with weeds, completely covered with weeds, because the government thinks, because the policies are made with the belief that people who live there for centuries, people who have known the grazing lands for centuries, they don't know enough. It looks like a grazing land that's filled with exotic trees. Barren, it might have green trees, but it's completely barren, completely devoid of any sort of useful life forms. And why is this? Because drylands are not green enough. And this is a big wall that is stretching right up to the horizon. And why is this happening? Because people are not rich enough. This particular story is extremely interesting because 10,000 acres of a particular grazing land was completely diverted without any consultation of local people who are dependent on that for centuries, for purposes such as setting up a synchrotron, for setting up an atomic enrichment center, and setting up a drone testing facility and another satellite research institute. And this completely cuts off the access. The walls are so tall that you can't even think of going on the other side. And the wall that I showed you in this previous slide is just one of several such walls. This is one wall of a 4,000 acre plot, but what I was talking about is 10,000 acres.
When we met the local representative who was responsible for implementing the projects, he told us, I grew up a very hard way. I was myself a shepherd. When I went to the US, I lived there for a number of years. I saw the good life that people lead there. I want my people to lead the same kind of life, and which is why I've brought the projects here, so that they all can get employment here and they also can live like the way the US people do.
Thousands of people have protested against this diversion. They have gone onto the streets, children, women, old people, everybody has gone to the streets and protested, asking for the lands to be given back to them. They don't want to be working in these research institutions as menial labor. They want to have a life of dignity where they can live as shepherds, and that's what they have done. Despite this, there is very little media attention. The government is not interested, and right now the case is being heard in the court, in a very special court in India, which is known as the National Green Tribunal, which hears only green environmental issues. And interestingly, what happened last month was that one of the beneficiaries, the Indian Institute of Science, which also happens to be the largest research institution in India, withdrew the synchrotron project. They have said they'll continue with their second campus in the same place, but they will withdraw the synchrotron project. And the very next day, there were reports in the press lamenting this whole thing, saying, you know, oh, it seems like such a sad thing that we had something so big coming up, and now it's all going away. And so the very next day, the director of the institute gives this statement in the press saying, a synchrotron is a big investment, but India is not a small country, and scientists here can't afford not to have one. It will eventually have to come up. So what does that mean? You know, and what does that mean to the shepherds living there? And also, why does this even come up? You know, from this politics of inadequacy, I believe stems this whole argument of development. Like everything, you know, all the policies and all the discourses, everything are centered only on one argument, that is that we need more development, without questioning the fact that it has failed several other countries, without questioning the fact that, you know, it has failed our own countries and our own local needs and our own people. So my question is, can we shift our focus from economic development to dignity, to human dignity? And this brings me to this a beautiful quote by Buckminster Fuller, one of the scientists of our times, who said, you can never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. So I'm going to leave you with a question. Can we build a world wherein the existing model of development becomes obsolete? Can this little shepherd continue to be a shepherd, and can he probably go to the US one day and come back and tell his people, you know, yeah, it is a wonderful country, they have their own culture, they have their own traditions, they seem to use a lot of machines, but I'm so glad that we don't use as much resources as they do. Thank you.